All right, we're recording. Welcome back to The Dilemma. I'm Emma.
And I'm Brian.
Burns. And today we have a special guest.
My name is John Oeder.
John Oeder, our second guest, and we're so excited to have you. I did just want to mention the reason I'm wearing my cap and gown is because I graduate. What date, Dad?
December 16th.
Good job. So I thought I'd wear this for the beginning of the session, but we'll take it off. And today we're going to be, you want to dive into what we're talking about today, Dad?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about how to leverage coworkers to be more productive together.
Yep.
And John and I actually used to be coworkers. John, did you want to kind of introduce yourself and share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, that's right. Brian and I were coworkers in the past. In fact, after a long career in retail and wholesale, I joined ADP back in 2010. And the first person I met in that process from that industry, from the sort of SaaS industry, was Brian Burns, who was doing a customer call, and I was going on a ride along to kind of get a first person account of what it was like to be in a seat and doing the job. And Brian was very kind to include me in that call with the customer and show me the ropes. So that was back in 2010.
My favorite part about that story, though, is that when we met, we were heading into the call. So I shared with John a little bit about, the company and what we're going to be doing. And he said, okay, so do you want me to lead the call or do you want to lead the call? And here's the guy that knew nothing about the product I'm selling or anything like that. And that actually scored big points in my feedback to the hiring manager at the time, because I thought that took some guts to be willing to put himself out there like that.
That's awesome.
Guts. I'm not sure about brain power. Guts. Yeah, I don't know what I would have said in that meeting if I said, yeah, go ahead and take the lead. But yeah, at least.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. I should have done that.
That would have been fun.
Yeah. So shall we get right into it?
Let's get right into it.
Good.
So what are some tips, John, that you can think of for somebody getting started? So Emma's kind of the beginning stages of her career, and she's obviously going into corporate world, business, sales. Any tips that you can think of to kind of get started on the right foot in a sales role?
Yeah, great question. So Emma, you've done your background work very well, getting your education, wrapping that up, coming up here. What is it again? December 16th?
December 16th, yes.
So that's fantastic. I think that's step one. And then from there, it's really just about getting in there and applying yourself. I know for me personally, when I kind of came into this industry, as I mentioned earlier, my expertise really wasn't in this industry prior to this. And, I would say that the last 10 or 12 years have been probably the most productive and fun of my career. And I would say it's because of this industry. There's a lot of potential there for you. What worked for me, and may be different for you, of course, but what worked for me was exactly what Brian and I were just talking about, which was almost a sense of volunteerism, right? If there was a mission, I would volunteer for it. And, there wasn't ever a point when I wasn't scared out of my wits to do these things, to jump on a phone and start calling customers, cold calling them about a product I didn't really understand, about an industry I didn't really understand yet. But what I found was that at the end of the day, it's really not about that as much as it is about, making that effort. You're going to make some mistakes, and just kind of finding a way to quell your fear of mistakes. Now, I will say this, at that point in my career, I was already pretty mature in my sales career overall. I'd already had a lot of failure and mistakes, and so you get kind of used to that feeling over time. But that's really what it's all about is, someone said to me, that uncomfortable feeling you have when you're about to do something in sales is the feeling you should have pretty much every time you are engaged in a sales conversation with somebody, because you should feel something in the pit of your stomach, a certain sense of dread. You have a lot at risk. You may have done a lot of research, going into a sales call, and, one mistake, one, lack of rapport moment with your prospect and you could blow it, right? And so, it's always fraught with risk, but the reward's great. And at the end of the day, you just pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, you get back in the saddle, you do it again, hopefully fail less bad next time. But that's what success is all about, right? It's about those 2 or 3 or 4 out of 100 times when things come together perfectly. And, the reward for that is usually, financially it's really good. And also, just from a sense of accomplishment is, it's very rewarding.
So
Now,
getting
you seem
comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
seem like a very confident guy, and I think it's important in sales because you need to hold a place in the room in a sense. Now, what advice would you give me just starting out? It's really easy for people to steamroll anyone who doesn't have the same amount of knowledge as they do about the industry or the product. What advice would you give me to do the same? Is like be confident, and is it kind of like, do I just act, or I don't know?
Right. Good
Fake
question.
it till you make it.
Fake it till you
Yeah.
make
There's a degree of that, right? That's an expression. Fake it till you make it is an expression for a reason, I think. And certainly I think that's, look, the other part though is humility, to be humble, right? And to say, hey, you know what? I don't know everything. Or, hey, you know what? Pardon my ignorance. But, and then ask your question, right? And it's okay not to know everything. It's okay to say, hey, I'm new in my sales career, but I'm eager to get you a result that's going to have value for you, right? And really what we should be focused on is that, because at the end of the day, when the sales process is over for you and the buying cycle is over for you, let's be honest, at the end of the day, the salesperson that you dealt with isn't the person that's going to be your main point of contact, most likely going forward. I'm really here to help you navigate that sales process. And I come with an army of people behind me, right? I'm the tip of the spear here.
I love that.
I might be a brand new tip of the spear, but at the end of the day, there's a whole organization of experts and professionals behind me. And I'm here representing them. And, anything I don't know today, I will take notes and I'll come back to you with answers and then follow up and actually do that. One thing I think that is important, for your own credibility and validity to the customer is to follow through in your commitment, right? And having said that, to know when to ignore that, because there are times when you get those kind of spurious questions that aren't going to help move the sales process for the customer or for you. You can ignore those ones. We'll get back to those later. Let's focus on the essential things. But at the end of the day, too, I would say that, we call it swagger, right? Going into the room with swagger and feeling like you own the room and you've got that
Moxie.
confidence, right?
Little bit of moxie, yeah.
Yeah, that just comes with time. And in the meantime, it's borrowing all that experience of everyone behind you in the organization. Think about, they've sold to customers and they're going to tell you stories, right, about the customers that bought from your company. They're going to share those if they're like most sales organizations, because they're proud of those things. And you can kind of adopt those stories as your own. Well, we sold to customer XYZ in a similar scenario.
Yep.
And what the result for them was X, number of dollars in return on investment by making that investment. And you didn't sell that customer, but you're working for the company that did. So you can carry that swagger into the room with you, right? The brand recognition of your company, or if it doesn't have a huge amount of brand recognition, whatever its track record is of success in the past. Hopefully you have a couple of those things. If it's a brand new startup, you're on your own there, kid.
Yeah. So I have a few thoughts that I can share. Yeah, thank you, John. That was good. But it gets my brain spinning and thinking. And a few things that I thought of that you can do, Emma, and anyone really starting in a new role, is to make a list of all the contacts internally and externally that you need to know. From the tech guy that helps you get your laptop working to the executive that's going to make that's going to approve your proposal, pricing, right? So your in sales, it's your solutions consultant. Who's that going to be? And your, your BDR, business development rep, the finance person that I mentioned, legal, somebody that's going to approve a contract or, approve red lines, those kinds of things. And then any like key partners, whether those are internal or external, they might be, implementation companies that you partner with to do the implementations, and you just want to meet them and go, make 15-minute appointments with each of those people and understand what they do, how they make decisions, how they can help you essentially in your role. And then at the end, you can kind of make sure that you tell them your story so they get to know you and they respect you, and ask, what you could do to help them. Usually there's not a lot you can do to help them, but you never know. Sometimes asking that question helps to build rapport with those internal contacts that you're going to need at some point during a sales process. So those are kind of, and then the last thing I would say is learn the products, right? So that's kind of hard to do, but something that John and I have talked a lot about that I think a lot of sales organizations get away from because they're chasing after the latest, sales technique or book or whatever, but just learning what the product is, what it does, and what it means to the customer, right? Like if I'm selling you a pen, it's a pen, it writes, and why is that important to the customer? Because they need to sign contracts with it, whatever, right? But understand what that product is, does, and means. And if you can do that with some of the key products, then you can pretty much, that'll help you get over that knowledge gap, right? Pretty quickly,
Right.
so that you sound like you know a little bit about the product and not just what it is or what it does, but how it will impact your customer.
Yeah, and I think this is all great advice because I think one of the biggest setbacks for me, or like personal setbacks, is walking into a room feeling like you're not as educated as everyone else about, what they're talking about or what they need. And so, I think being upfront and letting them know, like, I don't know the answer right now, but I'll find the answer is so important. And it also allows you to grab knowledge from other areas about questions you didn't previously know about and learn about it. So then going forward, you know how to answer it.
Something else I found is I have done, I'm currently starting a new role in a company, and so I had to do those things. And I've met some people, and although they aren't necessarily the person to go to on everything, they've told me like, hey, I know it's hard to navigate this company. Just ping me if you need have a question on something. And I've done it, and they've been super helpful, even though it's not even something that they deal with a lot of times. The question's like a little bit out of left field, but they're really happy to put me in the right direction, or even send off, in some cases, they're sending off emails on my behalf saying, hey, can you help Brian with this? And having somebody in the company that's higher up that has that kind of weight can make all the difference in, helping to navigate things quickly.
Well, I had one other perspective to share, you guys. Emma, particularly thinking of, you going into your first sales engagement, going into the, hopefully in person, right? But maybe it's a Zoom meeting to go meet with a potential customer and to talk to them about your product or service that you're going to be selling or offering. And, I'm just thinking about it from the opposite side, though, of imagine if you owned that company, right? And you wanted to hire people because you've already got the expertise, you built the product, right? As the owner, you've brought in the specialists and the scientists and everybody else to come up with the technology. But now you need someone to go be personable and relatable and convey that information in a way that's non-technical, right? And that is kind of more human. And that's where maybe those really brilliant people, those PhDs that are making this software product, maybe they don't excel there. That might be their biggest challenge in life, is really being able to be relatable, right? And so that's why you make the big bucks in the sales role. Is it's not really so much about how much knowledge you have about the product. A cursory knowledge certainly you should have, and a cursory knowledge of the industry, and most importantly, at least a cursory knowledge of your customer. When you go in, you don't want to be asking your customer questions that you should know going in, right? It's not really the spot for you to go in and to be asking them about their business, things that you can find publicly. You want to
Right.
ask them questions about things that you can't find publicly and that are private information internal that's actually going to impact, how your product will help them for sure. That's where you want to spend your time. And that shows you've done your homework. And that buys you a lot, again, of credibility and validity, I think, in the customer's eyes, if you're able to come to the table and have done your research on their website, gone and looked at LinkedIn and maybe looked at Glassdoor, just to see what their company, attitude and atmosphere is like, and what their place in the marketplace is like, how they're perceived, what product they make, what solution that they're actually solving. So you've got the basic things, but at the end of the day, even though this might be your first sales engagement, you might actually be way better suited for that sales conversation than the person who does have, that PhD and has gone through and actually created the product.
Yeah.
You'd probably do a much better job than that person would, even in your first day, because, it's really kind of what your focus is, right? And it's where your expertise lies, and you'll grow it and build it as your career advances. But, you'll bring some of that to the table already, I believe.
Agreed. And you might have a dog barking in the background, which could distract you during that meeting. That's the meeting that you referred to.
Okay, so it is audible. Sorry about that, you guys.
It's all good. John has a really cool dog, Emma. He's big. What kind is it?
He is a Newfoundland, and he weighs about 140 pounds. He looks kind of like a bear.
Yeah.
And, we just put water in the pool for the first time. We just built a pool, and he's out there just going crazy. So I apologize for the background noise.
It's all good.
You're okay.
So shall we move to the next topic at hand?
Yeah,
Emma?
I think that was a great start. I'm like taking it all in. I'm gonna probably rewatch this like 5 times because it's all just it's so helpful, especially coming from people who have the experience and the knowledge in different industries, kind of doing the same thing, but it's with different companies. So you always run across things you don't know about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, something that we all kind of struggle with in sales is, where do we find motivation when we're lacking it? Like, how do you get out of that proverbial rut, right? When you're just unable to, get somebody on the phone or get that next appointment or move a deal along to the next stage in the sales process, get something unstuck, so to speak. And John, I'll tee that one up for you. I know you and I have had some success working together to achieve that, but I'll let you share your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. I think it ties into some of the things we just heard about. We heard about Emma, her feeling, right, of going into a room, which you said earlier about, potentially going into that room to make her first sale and feeling like, do I have all the knowledge I need? Or when you're in the sales role and you've got some tenure and you're trying to move a deal across and your customer stops responding because something's going on over there, right, at the customer. Maybe they don't want to share with you what that is, but there's some obstacle to the process, right? Or, conversely, maybe you're just trying to gain access and, man, you've made 100 phone calls and sent out 1,000 emails. Nobody's responding positively to you, right?
Yeah.
And that happens in sales. That's one of the key things. And I think, as a salesperson, I think one of the things that I have to kind of keep in check, and I look at in a way as one of my biggest obstacles. I mean, it's also something that I wouldn't do without, but it's your emotions, right? Because at the end of the day, it does get kind of depressing or, frustrating when you're making all this effort and you're not getting results. Or, sometimes you take a sale all the way to the end and you lose to a competitor. That happens about half the time, typically, for most, sales roles. Yeah. There's always a competitor out there, and you're not always going to win. So, what do you do about that, right? And I think one of the things, as you're doing this job, is you realize, like, you do have to stay productive, right? And, focus on, what can you do? And that might even be something like, if you think about your day or your week and you kind of break it up and you say, like, what activities are being, in what is my week made up of from an activities perspective? And some of those things are outbound calls to customers, presentations, strategizing internally with different members of your team on a sale. But part of that might also be things like sales enablement, things like, you've got a training that's due, right? So maybe it's better when things aren't going great to take a couple of hours and go finish up a training, strengthen your skill set and work on something to kind of distract your mind and just help yourself get out of that rut, that mental rut, or that emotional feeling of, negative emotional feeling that you might have from a, less than successful engagement that you were in. And let yourself kind of process that so that you can move on and go on to your next engagement, because it's up and down with sales, right? It's continuously, you'll work on something for 6, 8, 12 months or more. And another time somebody will just come knocking and say, can you please sell me this? I want to buy it right away. So you never know, right? So you kind of have to,
that happens a lot less than we'd like, right, John?
It does, unfortunately, in this business. There's not a lot of walk-in customers. But my point is that there are some of those too. And that in general, you can't get super emotionally happy about that customer because that's not something that's going to happen all the time. And so you can't get sad about somebody else that's, maybe not going to close for whatever reason. You just got to refill the funnel. You got to kind of find a way to do that. It takes time though.
Man, it's like being a goalie, right? You're a goalie in soccer, and you had to have a short-term memory, right? So when you got scored on, you would get really frustrated, and you'd be like, I could see it in your face that you were just like so upset, right? So I would tell you to just brush it off, and you just put that one behind you, just pretend it never happened, and start as if it was 0-0. And continue to move on. And it's the same thing with sales. You have to sort of, those deals that don't go your way, or that stage that doesn't go your way, you got to brush it off and figure out how do I improve this? How do I improve for next time? Or how do I turn this around? Or, what strategy can I do? And one of the things that I really liked doing for myself was leveraging other people. And John was one of those people that when we've worked together, we've actually worked together at 2 different companies. And interestingly, both had, I think, our biggest sales years of our careers, both of those times when we worked together at 2 different companies. Anyway, that aside, I would grab John and say, hey, here's the stage I'm in this process. Here's the background on the situation. Here's the, product I'm selling. Here's the customer. He would ask me some questions, and then we'd strategize together. He would give me, sometimes just having another person's perspective, seeing it from another angle, or asking those questions that maybe you didn't think to ask, can make all the difference in moving a sale or an opportunity, to the next stage. And then the other thing that we did is when we make dials, like, because in sales, it never stops, right? You think, well, once I get to a certain place, I'm just going to get opportunities handed to me. Well, that never happens, right? So as in every sales role, you have to be making phone calls and creating your own opportunities to some degree, some to more, to a greater degree than others. But John is really good on the phones and making dials. So I would get in a conference room with him, or when COVID hit, we would actually do this over the phone and do it virtually, where I'd call and put him on mute and call a prospect and try to schedule an appointment. And what that person can do that you're dialing with is they can make notes to you to say, hey, try saying this, or did you think, like write down a product name, or just a word that might trigger something for you to be able to say to get them to be interested in continuing the conversation, or getting you to the right person. Sometimes the hardest part about making a prospect call is just getting past the gatekeeper, we call it a gatekeeper, right? The receptionist, the person that's either going to transfer you to the right person or not. And even like John mentioned, doing a little bit of homework on that company to be able to say, who you need to reach, why you need to reach them, how this might impact their company. Some of those little triggers can make all the difference. And then when they pick up, if you know a little bit about where they went to school or what they where they worked before, or sometimes it's, hey, we have something in common. We both used to work at such and such place, or we both graduated from the same school, or something like that can just take that call down a little bit, like take it from this, hey, I'm trying to book an appointment with you, to just a conversation between two people.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, is humanizing yourself in a phone call when you have a product to sell. Because especially for me, my role right now is sales development, or like business development. So I'm trying to get business for the reps to then sell to these people. Yep. So a lot of times I'm trying to be myself, but I'm trying to also sell, like try to get them to book the next call. So sure, it's very difficult to like break it down to like, this is just a conversation, but I need to, like, I want you to move forward with this.
Right. Well, and you could do the same thing. Grab another BDR. You guys aren't competing with each other, but you can create a competition. That's what John and I would do. Hey, whoever gets the most appointments by noon, the other one buys lunch, right? Or something to that effect. And it motivates you, and it makes you want to get that make that next dial, and it gives you a reason, as silly as it might be, to keep
moving. I don't think it's silly. That's what sales is.
I never wanted to lose, right? And I know John doesn't either. I think the most appointments I ever booked doing that with him was 11 in one day, which is pretty unheard of. And I think you had that, or maybe you beat my record. I can't remember, John. Something.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that was the.
You muted yourself, by the way.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think I hit the space bar. That was one of the things I found the most satisfaction in was winning whether it was that free lunch, or maybe the manager offered a gift card, and that could have been just $10 Starbucks card or something, something not even that impactful, but it was just kind of the bragging rights and the feeling of accomplishment, right? That you actually achieved something like that. But I think, to Brian's point, one of the other things that I've learned was that I wasn't really the best at messaging, right? So I have the courage to pick up the phone, make a fool of myself potentially, but I thought, it'd probably be a good idea to pick up the phone and have as productive a conversation as possible. In other words, put myself in the shoes of the person that's getting that phone call. Man, you've got my attention for about 7 or 8 seconds. You better be impactful, because my day's full of stuff and I don't have time, right? So, but you might find something that's compelling for me, right? And so if you get to the point quickly, right? So I put myself in that position, and I thought to myself, like, how can I be impactful in my talk track to try to get people to meet with me? And so working with Brian and with other reps as well, I tried to kind of filter down what things were working and were impactful for getting that accomplished, right? Because you're not trying to sell a product or service right now. You're trying to sell the idea of taking a meeting. That's all. Just take a meeting, right?
Yes, that's
so
exactly.
Why should I take a meeting, right? Like, bring me that info quickly, concisely. Might be I don't want to. Okay, great. Because I don't want to talk to you either. I need to burn through every no in my database today to get to the people that do want to talk. So I don't want to waste too much time on you either. I don't want to be rude, don't get me wrong, but I mean, I think it's actually polite to get off the phone quickly if there's zero relevance of my talk track for you, right?
Right.
But how do I get that message in a concise way? Go ahead.
No, do you say that to them?
No.
Sorry. Okay, I was gonna ask. Like,
you don't say that to them, but you treat the call that way.
Yeah.
Is what he's saying, I believe.
Yeah.
But the other thing you might get is some information out of them, right? So maybe it's not now, but maybe you can get from them, hey, when is your contract up with that vendor, or whatever that might be? When is a good time to check back in with you? And then you make yourself a note, and then before you know, and that's how I booked some of those 11 appointments. Was I had that day, I had like 3 of those popped up and said, this person said to call them at this time. And when I did, they picked up because they were expecting my call, so to speak. And
or who's a better contact to get in touch with if it's not you?
There you go. Exactly.
Yep.
And can I get your email address? Because maybe I didn't have it, so I can follow up or whatever, you know.
Yeah, that's good.
So do you want to move into the next discussion point, Emma?
Yeah.
Tee that one up.
How to know when to make your next career move. This is tough for everyone, I think, because it's easy to get comfortable in your situation, knowing people, coworkers, or the product, which is you're familiar with. And so even for me, like when doing an internship, I had never been in the industry before, but it's like after internship is over, when to know when is the right time to make a career move?
Hmm. I personally consider myself an expert on this one. I've made a career study out of this particular question. I've made some moves. And I think that in the past, when I was younger, those kind of moves were kind of frowned on. It was really not looked at as ideal to go from company to company to company. And that's changed over the years. So I think that really opens up some possibilities from a career growth perspective for, people in your generation, Emma. So, one thing I think you can break it down into a few different categories. The top of mind one that comes to my mind is just from a career development perspective, as you kind of complete your skill set in the thing that you're doing today and become quite good at it. Are you bored now? Are you looking for more challenge? And also, if you were as good at doing what you're doing currently in your next role that is more challenging, is there a potential improvement in earnings for you that's significant enough to make it worth making a change, right? Because one thing to bear in mind is, as you make these changes, there is an onboarding period. On every time you make a career change, learning that new career, learning that new job and that skill set. And, that's good for you. It's good for your brain, right? It makes you think and it makes you learn, but it does take a certain amount of investment of time and resources from you as you're making those switches from one thing to another. So you have to kind of measure that and say, hey, does it make sense for me to make this move to get an extra 2 or 3% over what I'm making now? Probably not, right? You should make a more significant amount of improvement to your financial well-being in order for you to want to invest all the time and effort. Now, the second thing is you might be fleeing something. So there's a saying in this industry that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. And there's been situations where you just work with somebody that has a different philosophy than you do about how to get the job done. Neither of you are wrong. It's just disagreeable. And my philosophy there is that life is too short to be in a disagreeable scenario for very long. So if I find myself in that scenario, I know it's time for me to kind of make a move, because you can't change the circumstances when it comes to leadership of what that person's expectations are. And if you don't fit within those parameters comfortably, you'll probably find a place where you do. And currently in the sort of environment that we're in, there's a lot of opportunity. So make sure you're happy is my advice. Those are the two top of mind things that come to my mind when I think about it.
I agree with all of those. I would add or expand on that to say that perhaps when you've reached a plateau in a particular role and that you're kind of you envision yourself somewhere else, and you're not able to do that in that role. So perhaps, especially early in your career, right? I've kind of reached a place where I like the role I'm in. I don't necessarily want to move up in the company, so to speak, but you may be in a place where you're ready. You've reached a plateau and you're ready to move up and move on. And I'm not a big fan of making change as much as maybe John. My dad worked for the Southern California Gas Company for 30 years and retired from there. And I have a lot of respect for that. I don't know that today's corporate world allows for that really anymore. It's just changed where people don't do that as much. But I say, you know, stay with it if you're still happy and you're able to reach your financial goals and all of that. But that's one area. It might be that you just need a bigger challenge. Maybe you're not being challenged in the role that you're in, and it doesn't mean that you have to leave companies per se. You could leave. You could, you know, find another avenue within the company and see if there's a career path. And companies are really into that right now, helping people find a path that works for them. If you feel stuck or trapped, as John mentioned, you know, a manager that you just don't fit, you know, you're not a good fit for each other. Some managers know how to motivate me, others don't, right? And that's okay. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean that, we've talked about this, right? It doesn't mean that either of you are wrong. I like the way John said that. But if it's, especially if it's toxic, like if things are just not healthy, or you don't feel like you fit in that, the way that things are being run, maybe it's just not the right place for you, or it might not be the right department or division or whatever that may be. So you got to find something that works for you.
Well,
Sometimes you can wait it out. You know, a lot of times you know, someone will come in and if they're not managing in a way that's ethical or whatever, usually that's discovered pretty quickly and they move on, right? They're moved out. So sometimes you can wait those people out, but other times it's just not a good fit. Sorry, go ahead, Emma.
I can't imagine how frustrating it is to have a manager that doesn't believe in you or tells you no all the time, when that's what you get from your prospects or your customers or whatever it is, whoever you're trying to sell to. So I think that's a really important factor in sales, is to make sure you have someone that believes in you, because it makes the job more worth it when you come to work and someone's motivating you to keep going, even though that's not what's necessary. Sometimes that's what
Yeah.
you need when you get doors in your face all the time.
I think you're right, Emma. I think it's critical, actually, because you're right. I mean, you know, you're on the front lines in sales, right? I mean, it's kind of a combative position to a degree, because look, people don't always like salespeople. Let's be honest. I don't always like salespeople. I am a salesperson. So, you know, it's a high pressure position. And it takes a certain degree of expertise, and you do need that support, right, from your manager. And when I've been in those scenarios, I've done the best. So I think it is kind of critical, right? And if you find yourself in a position where you don't have that support, and you know what, maybe if somebody else other than you was in that role with a different personality, that manager might be supporting that person much better, because they just kind of get them better. So that's kind of the chemistry behind all this stuff, is that there is, you know, a certain amount of a human element to this. So you've got to be a little bit flexible. You got to
It
be
is
flexible.
funny. We see this all the time, right, John, where they take the best sales guy, someone who's really good at selling, and they put him in a management role. He may not be a good manager. It may not be his fit, right? It just
Totally different skill set.
right. It does take a different skill set. And sometimes that person can be a good manager. It does happen, but it isn't always the case. And salespeople typically have very strong personalities.
Yeah.
And so you combine those two things, and it can be tough on both sides.
Yeah.
So so I think it's good. I think the other thing I will say, even though I'm not a big fan of making change too frequently, I don't think you should be afraid to make a change, because I know I've held on too long sometimes. There have been a couple times where I held on too long to a job, trying so hard to make it work, when once I left, I was like, oh, this would have been a lot better if I did this sooner. You know, everybody would have been happier.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's my point there too, Brian, you know, and that's the one thing I think that it's important for, you know, the younger generation to think about is I just think about, you know, all the different jobs that I lingered too long in and spent time doing something that I wasn't enjoying and very productive in, as I kind of waited it out or whatever the case might be. And I just think, you know, I wish I would have cut bait much sooner and moved on to the next position that I belonged in, and made a space for the next person that would have really liked to have been in my seat. You'll be much happier. So I think that's a key critical point.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. So Emma, how are we going to close this one?
Usually we close it with like a fun fact or like a question.
What are one of those questions, like the drink one? Do you have another one?
The last time we answered what our favorite drink was, we could answer what our favorite fall activity is.
Fall activity.
I'm excited to take you to the pumpkin patch when you're here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to visiting you in Florida.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That'll be good. How about our favorite? Well, maybe we could ask John this, since we didn't get to ask Jamie what his favorite vacation spot was, where he went. I think I might know the answer to this, but I'll be curious to see what John's favorite vacation that he's been on, or destination.
That's a great question.
Oh yeah.
I've been around the world a few times, you guys. I've vacationed in Greece, on the islands. I vacationed in Spain, in Barcelona. I think my favorite, though, is just Hawaii. I mean, it's just the most beautiful place in the world. People call it the vortex. You go there and you just feel peaceful and calm, and the weather's amazing. And I have a great time every time I go there. You're able to spend dollars. You don't have to go convert your money, and everyone speaks English. So it just makes it a really easy, fun place to go and relax and kind of unwind. So whenever there's like a President's Club trip or something like that, if it's Hawaii, I'm always like, hey, I know I'm going to have a good time. I've been there a couple times, but it's always a good time.
And the flight's good, right? The flight's easy for the most part.
Easy.
You're not traveling 18 hours to get to another part of the world.
Exactly.
But you feel like you're in another part of the world.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good one. And you forgot to mention one place that you've traveled to, and that's Bermuda, because we were there together on the President's Club.
Yeah, that's right. That's another one. I'll take Hawaii over Bermuda any day. But yeah, that was also an interesting trip, and it was great to go there.
Putting our feet in the pink sand, right?
Yep.
All right. Anything you want to ask me, Emma?
No.
No?
I think we
Are we gonna close it with that?
Yeah, I think so. That was a good answer. I loved Hawaii. It's beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. It's really great. Like I said, I'll probably rewatch this like 5 times after. So so much good advice. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks you guys for having me. I hope it was helpful, and I certainly enjoyed it, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good to
All
see you
right.
again.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.